The Wine Rack site takes great pleasure in presenting the owner and operator of Wine Supply Australia, Mr. John Baruzzi. John has a wealth of experience in the wine industry, working at Penfolds and Orlando Wyndham Wines in South Australia, complemented with experience in Italy and California. Today, John graciously shares some of his insights with us.
Today we're here with John Baruzzi, who's a multi-award-winning winemaker here in South Australia. And John, we welcome you to the site here today, to the Wine Rack site.
Thank you very much, Steve. Pleased to be here.
And very glad to have you here and to maybe share some of your experiences, John. And I think first up we're looking at, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the kind of things you're currently doing with your business, Wine Supply Australia.
What I've been doing for quite some time is trying to focus on markets where I guess a lot of the production and the big boys aren't concentrating on. If you can find niche market, because I'm a small to medium winemaker, there's no point trying to make good wine at a lower price and compete against the larger companies. In the Australian market, it's become very dominated by the big players, the retailers in particular, and they are pretty much dominating shelf space and market space. So if you look for new markets, for example Asia, who are showing great interest in Australian wine, you can find a niche, you can find an importers, you get some relationship going there and find an importer that's got the same sort of ideals you have, you can find a niche. That's what I'm looking to do.
Well, John, we know that you've had a wealth of experience in winemaking here in Australia, but also learned that you'd had some time working in Italy and in California. I'd imagine that that'd be quite different to the Australian experience. I was wondering if you'd expand on that.
It is different. It's very interesting. At the time I was a bit younger, and it's now become quite common practice for a lot of winemakers to not only have a vintage here in Australia in the normal time in the southern hemisphere where we are, vintage times between January and March, but in the northern hemisphere, countries like Italy and France, etc., have their vintage later in the year, so it's August and September. So really, if you want to be, if you're a glutton for punishment, you like working hard, you might go in the northern hemisphere and have a vintage there for 10 or 12 weeks,
yeah,
and come back, and so you're getting 2 vintages in 1 year. So right. You can turn around and say that you've got 6 vintages in 3 years, so to speak. But the thing is, there you're working in different environments, you're working for different people, different ideas. If you're in France, they say this is the way we make Pinot Noir, we do this, we do that, and you listen and learn. So yeah, you're soaking up information all the time. Italy was wonderful, different varieties, and then you go to the west coast of California and there's different thinking, different input, different work ethic. It's all good learning stuff. It's very interesting.
And now able to put all of that together for your own products?
Well, I like to think so, but it's ongoing because a lot of these people come here, taste your wine, they make comments, you try and take some on board, so well, maybe I can improve that, or the time I spent note there, maybe I spent 3 months too long, I should have taken it earlier. You listen to comments from people that you respect to improve all the time. It's never ending. Experience, can only be gained by more of it.
Yeah. Well, John, the Wine Rack site has been having a bit of a look online at your website, winesupplyaustralia.com.au, and we really like that for each of the wines there you've got some description of the nose and the palate for people to have a look at. But what we really loved was that you'd made a recommendation for each of those wines on a meal that can be recommended to complement that wine. And we know that a lot of our clients struggle sometimes to make that choice, and they're looking for a starting point that your site gives.
Yes, well, it's a very personal thing. Take wine tasting, eating, food, etc. People have their own opinions, and sometimes they might just need a suggestion. It's not necessarily a guideline or an instruction. You must have white wine with light meals, white chicken, fish, etc. Depending on your own palate and whether it's herbs and spices are included, because sometimes they can add an extra dimension. They're guidelines to start with, because a lot of people nowadays enjoy entertaining at home, have people over, they put a lot of effort into preparing a dinner, doing 2 or 3 courses, and sometimes I say, well, what wines are we going to have? Look, I need some guidelines on what I should pair these with, or put wines on the table which people could then select what they want themselves. They might make a suggestion, because some people aren't quite sure, they don't want to be embarrassed by picking the wrong wine. Someone can often say, look, can I suggest this is a good wine that goes with that because of this, this and this. So it's guideline only, but
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading on your site, the page that you've got on some information on choosing a wine for a particular meal. And it was great, you took that same attitude there of helping people as a starting point, but letting them follow what their own personal preference is to come to an indecision.
Yeah, well, wines, generally speaking, a very complex thing, in particular red wines. Lots of flavonoid compounds, lots of colouring compounds, lots of tannins, and a lot of these, and lots of acid, total acidity. And sometimes an explosion of flavours in your mouth when you try, for example, McLaren Vale 1-year-old red wine, very big, very tannic. They're not sure how this is going to end. There's an explosion in their mouth, they're not sure if it's going to be soft. Some people don't like it, they don't like the puckering effect. That's why a lot of women nowadays are taking towards softer wines, whether they be Pinot Noirs or Merlots, and they think it's softer and more pleasant to me rather than that bigger, fuller flavoured wine. So, it's just navigating selection.
One of the other things that I enjoyed reading was that you've had a wealth of experience as a wine judge, both here in Australia and in New Zealand. And on our site, at the Wine Rack site, we're actually doing an invitation to anybody to do a review and tell us what they think of a particular wine and a favourite online. But if we were fortunate enough that maybe somewhere along the line you might do one of those yourself that we could put on our site for one of your favourite South Australian wines, we'd be delighted to have that.
Oh, I'd be pleased
on
to
our
do
site.
that. No problem. That'd be a good helping hand. Happy to help.
Terrific, thank you. Now, John, we really appreciate you coming along to the Wine Rack site today and giving us the benefit of some of your knowledge and experience. And it's very much appreciated and great to meet you. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for asking me along, and good luck with the venture. It's great.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you for joining us today to share in some of John Baruzzi's experience. He provided us with several other interesting comments that we could not fit in here today. So keep an eye out for more of John right here on the Wine Rack site.